Well, happy New Year to all of you, and welcome to our first edition of the Pathway to Purpose webinar in 2024. We're so glad you're part of the FCCI family. I'm Ken Powell, one of the leadership team members here in the FCCI home office. And before we dive into our webinar, we've got a few opportunities that we want to make you aware of. Please do take a moment and introduce yourself in the YouTube chat. We firmly believe that part of our calling here at FCCI is to propel a global movement of servant leaders who help each other lead companies for Christ. So please do introduce yourselves and allow us to be a part of that movement for God's glory. So here we are rolling into these early days of 2024, and we're so excited to provide early bird registration pricing for this year's international conference at the Everline Resort and Spa just outside of Lake Tahoe, California. The conference dates are September 15 through 18, and we've got a wonderful lineup of speakers that includes Donald Miller of StoryBrand, Jordan Rayner, who just released his new book, The Sacredness of Secular Work. I've got my copy on order. I hope you do too. Richard Blackaby will be with us, Crawford Loritz. You don't want to miss Crawford, and others. So please go ahead, register, and get those early bird pricing, and that's at conference.fcci.org. And speaking of registering, also in the near term, we'd love for you to register for our February webinar that's going to feature Gary Williams. Now, Gary's a dear friend of our ministry. He's been training leaders in relational evangelism for many years. He's gifted. God has just blessed him. Gary will be providing very practical strategies for sharing the gospel in the context of marketplace relationships. Knowing that you, our FCCI family, is deeply committed to the Great Commission, we wanted to pull Gary in for this training early in the year, equipping all of us to be more effective and influential for Christ. And as we do strive to increase our relational influence, let me remind you to leverage the FCCI Connect community platform. We'd love to have you involved. Connect serves as a means of generating conversation between the members and friends of FCCI. So consider adding your voice into that mix, become part of the fabric of our community. And you can learn more about the Connect app at fcci.org. And one last thing before we bring in Lauren Rilling for today's webinar content, we have a weekly podcast that provides great inspirational content from industry thought leaders, CEOs, spiritual coaches, authors, and more. So let us serve your 2024 spiritual and leadership growth goals as you listen to our weekly podcast. It's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So just search for the FCCI Pathway to Purpose podcast. And with that, it is a pleasure to welcome our guest today. She is a Christ follower, a kingdom influencer, and a fractional CFO with KFE Solutions. Lauren, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me here, Ken. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know, especially speaking to this topic about wise financial management and stewardship as we kick off the new year. I know you're a busy executive with KFE Solutions, balancing all that is with a lot of other family activity. Before we talk about family, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about, but tell us about this role that you have as a fractional CFO.
Well, for me, it's the most fun job that anyone could have because I get to combine my two favorite passions of business and faith all in one conversation. And I think when we're talking about money in particular, it's a very personal subject, even though we might be talking about business finances, because finance touches on what's important to us and it touches on all of our values. And so when we're having those conversations, they go so much deeper than just what's on the spreadsheet. But at KFE Solutions, we get to help business owners increase their profit so that they can increase their impact. That's our mission, because we don't see profit as just something that you just make a bunch of money so that you can go on more vacations, but really is, we want to be mission driven and impact driven.
I love it, and so thankful for that, and that desire to pull that together, because obviously that's at the core of who we are as an organization, our belief that that's what God's designed us to be and do as leaders within his kingdom, to impact and influence all areas of life. So speaking of other areas of life, I've seen you post some things on social media and about family, even about chickens. So tell us a little bit about your family life as well.
Well, I am a mom of three, and I've got three girls, including 8-year-old twins and a soon-to-be 4-year-old. And we've got 3 or 4 chickens and a cat. So there's always something to do. So we live in a
No doubt.
suburban neighborhood, but I'm not a homesteader. I wish I could say I was, but I'm really not. We just have a backyard with a few chickens, and that's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. Well, I grew up in a similar setting in that we had a large family, chickens, rabbits, lots of other pets running around. So I understand the joy of having all that going all the time and balancing all of that in life. So, well, before we get started, Lauren, and I'll turn things over to you here, but let me just remind our audience, if you would, go ahead and submit questions as we're going along, as things come to mind. Please go ahead and submit those questions in the chat, and we'll pull those up at the end and give Lauren a chance to interact and engage with you on a deeper level on some of those things that trigger questions for you. So let me turn things over to Lauren, and thank you so much again for being here with us today.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Ken. As Ken said, my name is Lauren Rilling, and I am a fractional CFO at KFE Solutions. And what that means is we get to help business owners to look at the forward looking financial numbers so that we can get clarity on making good financial decisions, and therefore increase your profit so that you can increase your impact in the world. And I am so excited for this topic today on the 6 keys to financially thrive. Because as business owners, it's different. You're not just taking home a paycheck at the end of the day. You are going in and making the sales and making sure the business is running, and you have a gift and a passion for what you do. And sometimes finances can get in the way of that. Sometimes finances can be the thing that drags us down. And I don't want that to be the thing that drags you down. I want that to be the thing that you look at and you're able to understand your finances and have clarity over them and be really excited for what's next, and for the impact that you get to make. And so, with that being said, I want to take you back in time before the iPhone, before GPS was everywhere, before we had 5G or 4G or 3G, back when we were still printing off our directions from MapQuest. The year was 2006. I was a college student studying abroad in Europe, and my roommate and a friend and I decided to take a trip to Spain. We flew to Barcelona, spent a couple days there, got on a train, went over to Madrid on the train. And when we got off the train in Madrid, it was dark. It was about 9:30 at night. It was in December, so it was about 30 or 40 degrees outside. And we head over to find where the taxis are because you can't call an Uber. So we go find our taxi and we give him the piece of paper that has the address of our hotel on it. And we say, can you help us get here? But we don't speak Spanish. He looks at the address and he takes us. And after about 15 minutes of driving, he stops and we're like, where are we? Because we didn't see this hotel. And he says, well, the hotel is down that alley. Because in Madrid, there are lots of these little streets. They're very charming, little streets with cobblestones, and you can't really get a car through there. So he said, your hotel's right there. So we say, okay, thank you. And we get our little suitcases out and he drives away. We walk over. It's not the hotel. We realize we're not even on the right street. We don't speak Spanish. We have no idea where we are in the middle of Madrid. We have no idea what our hotel looks like or where we even need to really go other than this address. And we don't know how we're going to get there. So now it's about 10 o'clock at night. We're in the middle of Madrid and we are lost in the fullest sense of the word. So we have 2 choices. Do we sit here or do we start walking? And we figure if we sit there, we're never going to find our hotel. If we start walking, maybe there's a 1% chance that we might find it eventually. So we start walking down these little cobblestone roads with our little rolly suitcases, just 3 college girls who don't speak any Spanish. After about half an hour of not getting any closer to our destination, not finding any indication that we're even getting to the city center where someone might be able to help us, all of a sudden, this man appears. And I'm kind of thinking, if you wanted to mug us right now, you definitely could. And he says, are you lost? And I'm thinking, what gave it away? So we say, well, yes, we are lost. And he says, where are you going? So now we're going to tell this random stranger where we're going and where we're staying while we're in Madrid. And that's what we do. And he says, oh, I know where that is. And we're like thinking, oh, sure, you know where this little hotel is. It wasn't like one of the big chains. And he says, yes, I'll take you there. Follow me. We're thinking, really? You think we're going to follow you? Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do because we don't know what else to do. So we're following a stranger at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night through the streets of Madrid. And he says, oh, I know a shortcut, follow me. So we think this is probably not wise, but we also don't know what else to do. So we're following a stranger now through the streets of Madrid and taking shortcuts through these little neighborhoods. After about half an hour of walking, we arrive at this little courtyard and he points to the door and he says, there's your hotel. Have a great time in Madrid. And he leaves. And in fact, it was our hotel. He actually knew where to go and he took us there. And so that was one of the scariest times of my traveling adventures, but also one of the stories that I like to tell because that feeling of being so utterly lost and you just don't know what to do, that's how we often feel when it comes to our business finances. I worked with a client named Christina. She runs a law firm, brilliant, brilliant attorney. But she was so in over her head when it came to the finances. She was working 80 hours a week because if she didn't work, she couldn't bill. She was totally burnt out, hadn't taken a vacation in who knows how long. She was making great money, great revenue, but didn't know how to get any traction to build her firm, didn't know how to get any traction so that she could take a break. Whenever she needed money for her own personal needs, she just took an owner's distribution in whatever random amount. And that's, really, really common to do. She just didn't know how she could make things different. And so in 2 years, using the principles that I'm going to show you with our impact framework, she was able to double her net profit. She was able to increase her revenue by 40%. All the while, she paid off $182,000 of debt, gotten an emergency fund in place for her business and her personal finances, and was able to take her first ever 2-week vacation and cut back to working on average 50 hours a week instead of 80 hours a week. Now, those are the kinds of results that definitely it was a lot of work, but it's the kind of stuff that any business owner can do and get results from. And that's what I'm going to show you right now in our impact framework. Now, for the sake of time, we don't have time for a deep dive into all 6 of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the 6 very briefly, and we're going to do a deeper dive on one of them because on that one, I think you can really take some of those things and implement them right away and start seeing results in your business. Also in the PDF slideshow that you'll be getting, I included a quiz that you can take, and it helps you assess each of the 6 areas of financial wellness in your business. And so you can see where you're doing really well, and it will give you some ideas for further action that you can take. So with that, we had this problem, right? We're lost. We need to know, first of all, where am I? Then where am I going? And then how do I get there? And so the first item in impact is investments over expenses. So we think of expenses as, oh, that's just the cost of doing business, right? We've probably heard you have to spend money to make money, but I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think that this idea that we have to spend money to make money is a huge disservice. And the truth is that we need to create value in order to make money. Making money comes from creating value for someone else, not because we spent money on our business. Now, that being said, are some business expenses necessary? Yes. If you are a cake baker, you need to buy flour and sugar and all the things that you need to bake a cake, right? So that is the reality. But I want us to start thinking of expenses in terms of what is an investment and what is just an expense? What's just overhead? For instance, does it really matter if I bought my chair from Amazon or from Pottery Barn? No, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't, one way or the other, it doesn't affect my revenue or my profit. It's just which kind of chair do I want to buy, right? So that's an expense where I would say try to save some money there. Don't go for the most expensive. Go for one where you can work, but don't overspend on things like furniture, right? In opposition to that, we want to double down on those expenses that are actually investments. And how do you know if something is an investment? The answer is very simple. If it makes you more money than what you originally invested, right? If I invest $1,000 in the stock market and I get a 10% rate of return, I can directly attribute that new money to the fact that I invested it in the stock market. So what expenses in your budget can you do that with? If you go through your expenses line by line, which items can you identify and say, I'm very confident that because we invested this amount of money into this line item in our budget, that we have more revenue and profit as a result compared to before we invested in it. So you really want to identify what are the things you can spend more on because they're investments and they are directly contributing to an increase in revenue and profit, and what are the expenses that are kind of just fluffy overhead where maybe you could either get rid of them or find a more cost-effective solution, and that actually frees up more cash to be able to invest in the things that are truly investments. M is mission minded. Now, I know that you guys are my people. Like, this is the group that talks about and really thinks about how do we connect our mission? How do we connect our values to our financial decisions? But when we're talking about making profit, that's not the norm, right? So we can feel kind of isolated or wonder, what is the connection between how I run my business finances and how I really execute this mission and stay on mission in my company. So, first of all, I would ask you, do you have clear and compelling core values? At KFE Solutions, when I onboarded at this company, the values were the first thing that I was taught. These are our core values. This is what they mean. And I had them memorized probably by day 5 because that's how important they are. And we talk about them all the time. Anytime that we're going to make a change or have a suggestion for improvement or an idea, we always have to identify which core value does this relate to? And I think that's fantastic. So, do you have clear and compelling core values? The other thing is this: start thinking in years and decades instead of in weeks and months. When we're making financial decisions, the temptation is to just look at that bank account balance and go, I don't know, what can I do right now? What's right in front of me? And while it is important to make sure that we're financially solvent, in the near future, we want to be thinking at a higher level. We want to be thinking with that 30,000 foot view, and we want to be looking a year ahead, 3 years ahead, 10 years ahead. Is this financial decision that I'm making going to get me one step closer to where I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So filter your financial decisions through your values as well as your long-term objectives and that vision you have, not only through the immediate needs of the company. P is profit over revenue. Now you might be familiar with the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. I'm a huge fan. He says, very rightly so, that when you look at your profit and loss statement, you're going to look at the revenue on the top, and it's revenue, and then you have all of your expenses, and then at the very bottom you have your net profit. So the formula is revenue minus expenses equals profit. And that is correct mathematically. But the way Mike Michalowicz says we need to start thinking about our finances differently is profit first. Think about your profit target, then think about your revenue, and then think about the expenses. So revenue minus profit equals expenses. In other words, limit your expenses, protect your profit. Now, I really like that way of thinking about it, but I also like the way of thinking of it as an addition formula rather than a subtraction. So if we start with profit, we're thinking of all the things that we want to do with that profit. So think about your goals for your own owner's income. Okay, there's no shame in that. Think about your own needs to provide for your family and the things that you guys want to do as a family. So owner's income. Think about the giving you want to do. Think about debt you want to pay off, savings that you want to have for the business, ways that you want to invest in the growth for your business, as well as taxes. Don't forget about paying your quarterly taxes on your net profit. So those things are all get what paid out of your net profit. And so when you figure out what those goals are, you can figure out how much profit you need. And then Add to that your expenses. So having an awareness over what you need to operate your company. And when you add those things together, that equals your revenue goal. Also, think about profit as a result of great service and wise stewardship. I actually listened to a sermon a few years ago. This pastor preached on the parable of the talents. I'm sure this group is quite familiar with that. The parable of the talents. And then he gets to the end and he qualifies by saying, yeah, God wants us to use our talents. Probably doesn't apply to profiting in business, but to everything else. God wants us to multiply what we have. And my heart sank. And I thought, how sad, because God owns everything, including our business profit. And so if we're doing a great job serving others, providing value to others, solving other people's problems, and they're willingly paying us for that service or product, and then we're doing a great job managing that money wisely, that's profit, and that honors God. So don't be afraid to put profit as a big goal and as a big priority in your business. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It's a priority when it comes to our stewardship. And then A is action and accountability, because results come from action, not from analyzing. Like, I could sit here all day long looking at spreadsheets, telling people where they went wrong and what they should do differently, but none of it matters if we don't actually take action. If my friends and I hadn't actually followed that man all through Madrid, we never would have gotten to our hotel. We had to choose to take action. So once you have the information, what are you going to do with it? And how are you accountable to your goals? Because life is busy, life is crazy, and we can feel really good when we have that level of insight and clarity and understanding, but nothing will change unless we take the actions based on that new knowledge and insight. And then this is C, and this is the one I'm going to do a deep dive into. So I'm going to kind of go skip past it, but these are the critical four, and these are the financial metrics that we look at with our clients every single month. And these are the four that every business owner needs to know. And I'm going to come back to this one. And then T is tax strategy. And sadly, this is kind of like the ugly stepchild of business, because it's almost an afterthought, or we just don't want to put that much effort into it. And here's the cold hard truth. You did not hire your CPA to optimize your taxes. When you hire a CPA to file your taxes for you and to tell you what your quarterly estimates need to be, you're not hiring them to give you a comprehensive tax strategy. You're just hiring them to give you an accurate tax return. So they're going to take all the numbers that you give them or that your bookkeeper gives them, and they're just going to say, okay, here's your tax bill. They might remind you that you can save some money on taxes if you prepay certain expenses by the end of the year and that kind of a thing. But honestly, that's not their job. If their job is to file taxes for you, you need to also work with someone who is specifically you are specifically hiring for tax advice. And so sometimes, your CPA will also offer that service, but it's a totally separate thing. And a lot of business owners just don't know that they may be overpaying in taxes. And so it's definitely well worth it to look into that and to have a solid tax strategy. And also, please don't buy a truck just to save money on taxes. If you actually need it for your business, go for it. But spending $80,000 to save $20,000 on taxes, you're still spending $60,000 more. So that's just my little tidbit there. But that's the impact framework. And if you will focus on each of those 6 areas of your business finances, then you will do very well financially. But I want to deep dive into C, into the critical 4, because there are certain actions that you can take starting today to help you get more clarity. Because we talked about how you first have to know where you are, then you figure out where you want to go, and then you figure out how to get there. And that's what we're going to do. Alan Milt said, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. And we're going to see how true that is when it comes to these critical 4 financial metrics. And they are revenue, gross profit, net profit, and cash. And what I'm going to do is take you through each one, and I'm going to give you a set of questions that you can ask yourself about each one. And that's going to draw out the insights, right? Because we can know our numbers, but Do we really understand what they mean? Do we really have context for being able to discern the significance of it and then to figure out, well, okay, if that's the number, then what do I do, right? That's where the real value is in looking at our numbers. So the first one is revenue. Now, I know I've been giving revenue a really hard time this whole webinar, but I'm going to show you why we do need to still keep track of revenue. It's not entirely vanity. It's only vanity if we don't know why we're trying to hit the number that we set. Dr. John Deloney says we speak in words and we think in pictures. And this is really true when it comes to our revenue. I had a client where I asked her what her goals were, just very open-endedly. And she said, I want to take my business from 2 million in revenue to 6 million in revenue. And I said, okay, great. Tell me about what you are envisioning will change about your life when you get to 6 million. And so she starts telling me all about how when she gets to 6 million, it's going to change her life because she'll have the money to hire the people that she wants to hire and outsource different tasks. And she'll be able to take more time off and be with her family more. She'll be able to give herself that raise that she wants. So it was so much more than just hitting this revenue number. For her, this revenue number represented this life that she was trying to create and this business lifestyle freedom that she wanted to achieve. And in looking at the numbers together, what we actually discovered is that she didn't have to get to 6 million in revenue in order to achieve those goals. Now, we can still try to shoot for 6 million. I'm not saying sell yourself short, but she didn't have to wait that long. We just needed to optimize her profit so that she could start doing some of those things that she wanted to do. So when it comes to your revenue, and you're going to look at this once a month and you're going to ask yourselves these questions. This is where we get super technical, you guys. Did revenue go up? Did revenue go down? And how much? Why? What were those drivers? Why do we think it went up or down? And this is so important. What are we going to do about it? How will we respond? If revenue was down a month, we could easily just blame the economy, blame this, blame that. Or we can say, all right, these are real factors, these are real circumstances, but what are the things that we can do to address it? And that is where those powerful conversations happen. And then when you commit and take action and review again, you can see the results of those different actions. So really simple. Did revenue go up or down? And how much? Why? And what are we going to do about it? How will we respond to this? The next one is going to be gross profit. Now, I love that I got this question, what's the difference between gross profit and net profit? And I love that this person asked me because they had been in business for over 20 years. They were a COO, they were part owner of the company, and we were just sitting down having a conversation, and I was just telling her, why the critical four are so critical. And she's like, but what is the difference between gross profit and net profit? And you know what? I love those kinds of questions because sometimes we can feel like, oh, this question might be too elementary or too basic, and maybe I should know that already. And I just want to let you know there's no such thing. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat and just know that there's no such thing as too simple of a question. There's nothing in finance, we're not innately born with financial knowledge. It's all stuff that we learn. So please make sure that ask those questions. I'd love to answer those for you. But right now I want to share with you just real briefly, what is gross profit? Gross profit is your profit after your cost of goods sold. So you have your revenue, and then anything in your profit and loss statement that is going into that cost of goods sold section. And that is going to be things like your materials. So let's use our example of baking a cake. Okay, we're all going to be bakers today. We're baking cakes. So your materials, so all of the ingredients to bake the cake, as well as the labor that it took to make the cake. So if you have a baking assistant and it costs about $50 of labor plus about $10 of materials, then your cost of goods sold is $60. If you sell that cake for $100, then your gross profit is $40 on that cake. So that is how we figure out gross profit. It's the cost of materials as well as the labor to provide that product or service. Now, these are the questions that we can ask ourselves when we're looking at our gross profit. And these are really insightful and deep, which is why we want to know our gross profit numbers. So one is, are we pricing appropriately? Because you can cut your expenses down to zero, but if it costs you more than in materials and labor than what you're selling that product or service for, you're going to be broke, right? You're already unprofitable before you've even covered overhead. So, are we pricing appropriately? Do we have the gross margins that we need to actually run the business and still make a profit at the end of the day? Are we estimating accurately? For those of you who have a business where you're going to be needing to provide an estimate ahead of time, you're probably looking at what all the costs are going to be and then marking up the cost. So when all is said and done, did you estimate it accurately? Were you expecting 20% gross margin, and you actually only made 10%, right? You can figure out why, what happened, what's going on with our estimates there. What is our profit per project or service? I actually had this conversation with a client recently. We identified one of their service offerings not as profitable. The gross margins on it were not as high as another service, and so we discussed the option of getting rid of that service because it would free up resources to sell more of the more profitable one. And then how can we save on material costs and labor inefficiencies? So if you have to remake that cake because someone dropped it on the floor, well, now you're paying twice. You have to pay for the materials and you have to pay someone to bake that cake again. And so if there are inefficiencies, and that's a very simple example, but construction is one industry where this is a big deal, and that's why you've got to keep up with what's going on a daily and weekly basis so that we can course correct and make sure that we're not wasting resources just by being inefficient or having the same mistakes being made over and over. And the other thing is, we can get real creative and say, well, if I'm buying all of my cake baking supplies at this one store, what if I shopped at this other store instead? If I saved some money on the flour, then that's going to increase my gross margins by 5%. Wow, I'm going to do that instead. So it helps us make better decisions so that we keep more of the profit that we're earning. All right, and just a quick note on gross profit. Markup is not margin. I promise this is as nerdy as it will get, but if you put a 20% markup, that's a 16.7 margin. So just be aware of that, that markup is not margin. And if you have something that costs $100, you mark it up 20%. That's $120. 20 divided by 120 is 16.7%. That's how it works. So just make sure that you're not conflating markup with margin. All right, now we're going to move on to net profit. Henry Ford said that business must be run at a profit, else it will die. And that sounds dramatic, but it's perfectly true. If you don't have profit, eventually your business will die. And that net profit is that profit number at the bottom of your P&L. So after all the expenses, so you take your gross profit and you take out all the other expenses, and that gives you your net profit number. Really simple questions again. Did our net profit this month go up? Did it go down? Did it stay the same? Why? What are the reasons that happened? And then how are we going to respond? Do we need to make a course correction? Do we need to make some changes? How can we do even better? How can we stay on the track that we're on? These are the kinds of conversations you want to be having so that you can take action. And then finally, last but certainly not least, is cash. Sir Richard Branson said, never take your eyes off the cash flow because it's the lifeblood of business. Now, I know this sounds so dramatic to say this is the lifeblood of business and your business is going to die without net profit. But think about the people who are saying these things, right? They've been in business for a long time and they know the connection between knowing these numbers and the success in your business. It's absolutely essential. So here's the thing. Net profit, as important as it is, right? Because with net profit, we are paying ourselves, we are paying our taxes, we are paying off debt, we're keeping money in reserves for a rainy day and also to grow the business. Net profit is so important, but it doesn't equal how much money is in the bank. I know, how supremely frustrating, but I'm going to explain why and what you can do about it. Because here's the thing, cash answers the question of when. This is the question that most business owners don't ask, and it's a huge mistake. Our CEO, Michael King, was doing an interview with a real great business owner named Ashley, and she was so gracious to share the time when she had a business that failed. She had purchased a concrete business, and she was looking at how, she was able to get these $1 million projects. Wow, $1 million in revenue, amazing. And she was going to take this business all the way to 100 million in revenue. And she knew how much profit she could make off of it. And so she's like, I've got this dialed in, I've got this figured out. What she didn't account for was the fact that she had to pay a lot of those expenses up front and wait several months to get paid. And that is what ultimately hurt the business and why she's not in that business anymore. It's because of cash flow. It's not because of what the numbers look like on the paper, on the financial reports. It's because you have to have so much money and be able to float all these expenses before you ever see a dime. I was having a conversation with another client. He had $80,000 in revenue, but he didn't have $80,000 in the bank. That's because 50,000 were invoices sitting in accounts receivable. And he didn't yet have a good process for making sure that his customers were paying on time. So we identified this is the thing we need to solve for. Let's get people to pay on time so that we don't have to worry about what happens when it's time to pay payroll. So cash answers not just how much, but when. And that is absolutely critical to know. When will I get paid? When can I afford to pay? All right. And so now it is time to take action. Michael King, again, our CEO, he says that if you're interested, it lives in your head. Like, oh yeah, that would be a great idea. I should probably do that. I feel good getting some knowledge. If you're interested, it'll live in your head. If you're committed, it'll live on your calendar. So what I want you to do right now, this is a webinar, so everyone's on their phone or their computer. Get your calendar out right now. And I want you to find a time when you can put 30 minutes to review your critical four. And we'll hang out here for a second. I want everyone to put it on their calendar. Find 30 minutes to review your critical four. And I would even challenge you to invite a colleague to do this with you. So if you're the CEO and you have a COO, or you have a finance manager, or you have hopefully someone that you can review this with, find someone who will help you stay accountable to actually follow through. And you can use the questions that we talked about today to ask those same questions. So you're going to look at your profit and loss statement and your balance sheet that'll have your bank account balance on there, and figure out what's going on so that this is where we're starting from. This is where we're at today. This is where we want to get to. And by asking yourselves those questions and creating a plan of action, you'll know exactly how to get there and you won't have to be lost anymore. All right. And with that, thank you so much. And I believe, Ken, I'll turn it back over to Ken and we can do questions.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate that high level overview and some of the deep dive that you went into there. And in particular, I wanted to just jump back if we could. And sorry for that question that came up from last time. Forgot to clear that one out. That one won't apply to us. When you were mentioning the action and accountability and talking about analyzing, I'm one of those people that can just live in the analyze world, right? I can just sit and spin in the analysis, right? Just keep going and going. And I love it, right? Let's create another chart. Let's build another graph. This is fun. So talk to us about, how do we know when we've analyzed enough and it's time to take action? Kind of what are some of those key indicators that says, hey, listen, we're at the point of action. Can you kind of help us with that a little bit? Maybe just what does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. So putting time limits around making decisions is really important. If it's a big decision, you want to give it more time. If it's a small decision, you want to give it less time, but you don't want this paralysis of analysis to stop you from moving forward. And here's the thing, we're going to make wrong decisions. So give yourself that grace to know it's okay if I make a wrong choice. If it's a high risk and you know that the stakes are high, then you want to surround yourself with people and feel confident that you have all the information you need. But when it comes to making financial decisions, we really are um, able to make adjustments. And so it's very rare that a financial decision is going
That's a good point.
to like absolutely sink you, unless it's
Right.
just you're just moving forward, with something, this grand plan that you haven't done your due diligence on. But that's why we want to review the numbers every month, because then we can make smaller course corrections and try things without the risk that comes with just sort of flying blind.
Sure. Yeah, that makes great sense. And here's a question that came in from Home Maintenance Solutions. Any tips on predicting cash flow better?
Yes. Okay. This is such a great question. So, what I would do is I would make a weekly cash flow forecast. And the way that you're going to do this, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be wrong. So, accuracy, perfection, that's not the goal. The goal is to estimate things and to know where our gaps are, and to keep track of it closely. So, if you can make a 6 week cash flow forecast where you're looking at, okay, how much revenue do I think I'm going to earn this week? And then the next week, and then the next week, and do that 6 weeks out. The closer you are to that particular week, the more dialed in it's going to be. Like, 6 weeks out is a little bit far, right? You can go with averages. You can go with, if you have a software that gives you an idea of your sales, pipeline, you can use that data. If you don't have anything, then give it your best guess and start collecting that data. And then you're going to do the same thing for expenses. So whenever, your bills are due, plug it into those dates. If it's due by the end of this week, plug it in for this week. If it's due 2 weeks from now, plug it in 2 weeks from now. We just did this with a client who pays every other week bi-weekly. So if you do that, then you know that there are 2 months out of the year where you're going to be paying 3 times. And that can really mess up your cash flow, right? Because everything else we kind of budget around the month. And so, what you can do with a weekly forecast is you can say, wow, I'm going to need this much more money to make payroll. So, how can I make sure I'm setting aside a little each week or each month and making sure I just put that in a savings account? And then when I need that money, it's already there. So those are my tips for predicting better cash flow. And then just review that weekly and update it, make adjustments. And pretty soon you'll get pretty accurate, and you can kind of make it a little game, because it's never going to be 100%, but it's fun when you start getting real close to those estimates. And the way that you want to use your cash flow forecast is really to anticipate any shortfalls. So if you're like, ooh, we might run into a problem 3 or 4 weeks from now, well, now I have 3 or 4 weeks to figure out how I'm going to navigate that, instead of it waiting to happen and now I'm in crisis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. All right, this one's a really simple one, but I want to pop it up because I wanted to ask you about the assessment. If you wouldn't mind just fleshing out the assessment a little bit, because you mentioned that the PDF would be coming with the PowerPoint slides, but talk to us about the assessment that's included there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I did is I took this impact framework and I thought of, okay, if we can ask ourselves maybe 5 questions for each one of those items, how could we get a good sense of if we're really doing well in that particular area? And if not, then could those questions point to something that we might want to focus on? So each area of impact has 5 questions, and you just answer yes, no, or sometimes. So it's really simple. You don't have to dig through your financials to figure it out. You'll be able to answer them. You'll know if your answer is yes, no, or sometimes. And you get 2 points for saying yes, 1 point for sometimes, and 0 points for no. And so out of each, for each letter of impact, you'll have a score out of 10. And the higher your score, the better you're doing. And the questions themselves, I think, will give some insight into some additional action that you can take.
That's fantastic. I'm going to pop back over here so we can see each other a little bit better and enjoy that fun little sound effect again, just because. But the other topic I wondered if you might touch on is just as a business owner, a senior leader, let's say in an organization where we're in a season within our culture where we're seeing a lot of labor costs escalating dramatically, right? I mean, we've seen everything from the union strikes to restaurant labor costs going up significantly. So maybe even how do we help employees, maybe those who really can't, they're not involved in the high level financial decision making. They don't maybe have a grasp or understanding of even our business model. They're an employee. They come in, they do a job, but they don't really grasp. So maybe even some strategy around how do we help as leaders, key leaders, to communicate maybe a little bit better that there are these significant costs and we can't just pass all that on to customers all the time. So what does that look like, and maybe how do
Mhm.
we navigate that a little bit within our society today?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, so many things are coming to mind because we have challenges, right? We want to attract and retain great talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be really easy to just go out there and hire whoever will apply first because it's a little scary to think, wow, I really need to hire someone. So the first thing I would say is it's way more expensive to make a mishire than it is to be patient for the right hire. So that would be the first one. Be patient and also think about your hiring as someone said this to me at a meeting once, and it just really stuck with me. He's like, I never have a problem hiring because I think of my hiring as like a marketing funnel. The same way that we're looking for customers and clients, we're looking for great people. So you need to have a funnel for that. They're not just going to like show up at your door. You know, unemployment is not high enough for that to start happening. So having great people who are really aligned with your company culture and values is going to be the first step to solving that. It's really hard to solve on the back end. With communication if there's just a disconnect on values and it being a good fit to begin with. The other thing that I would say is transparency and incentives are really powerful. If you can make performance-based bonuses a thing, and it's very clear what everyone's job description is and what their scorecard is, how they're being evaluated. There's absolute transparency and clarity and trust there. And that's a leadership. That's the job of the leaders, not the job of the employee to make that happen. That cultivates trust and that incentivizes performance, and higher performance is more cost effective than and it works better than, oh well, let's just solve our problem every time by raising prices. No, let's see where we can be more productive, but not in a way where it's just seeing people as just human capital, right? And then I would say the last thing would be transparency. Are you transparent about your numbers? If you're not, because you don't really know what to say or like you don't understand your numbers that well either, I would encourage you to get really clear on your numbers and then have an annual meeting or even a quarterly meeting where you say, look, guys, we're trying to accomplish this together. And again, having those incentives where everybody is winning and everyone is benefiting from it, where you can say, in order for us to accomplish this and for us to be able to pay these bonuses or go on this trip. I have a client who wants to take his staff to Hawaii. I think that's so cool. We have to hit these revenue goals and we have to hit these profit goals. So bringing everyone in as part of it instead of keeping it really secret, I think is also a great way to motivate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said early on is the M was related to being mission minded, as we looked at that
Mhm.
acronym. And I love that when employees really buy into the mission, that their desire, their goal of being there is more than just the financial, that they really believe in what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing, and that helps to carry that as well, and be a motivator and a driver towards success as they really buy into the mission, and it's bigger than just what's the take home paycheck. So love that.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, I know we're gonna, as we send out the email here following the webinar, folks. If you want to reach out to Lauren, you'll be able to reach her on LinkedIn. We'll have her that there as well as through KFE Solutions. But anything else, Lauren, as far as just um, KFE Solutions, what you provide, and motivation for folks to maybe reach out? What kind of services could they look for and expect from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we serve businesses that are typically anywhere from 1 million in revenue all the way to 20 and beyond. And what we find is that we're really able to come in as that fractional CFO, right? So we're here to advise you and guide you and give you forecasts and give you projections and identify here are the most powerful action steps you can take this month, right now. And we're here to bring that executive level leadership and accountability that maybe you're lacking because you're not at the point where it makes sense to hire someone full time for a full time CFO role, but you really need that financial strategy, and you really need someone who is going to be aligned with you on values and be able to have those candid conversations. And we're not in easy economic times. There's so much uncertainty, and so the way that we navigate that right now is going to have an impact, I believe, for decades on businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you
So
again.
they can reach out.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No,
They
go
can
ahead.
reach out, yeah, by LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message, or if you want to
Sure.
go on our website, kfesolutions.com, and we can just have a conversation and see, how we can help.
That sounds great. Well, really appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing all the great things that come out of people continuing to improve in this whole area of how do we manage our finances well and do that for God's glory. So, thank you, Lauren, so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Well, as we wrap things up here today, I wanted to just mention that we are growing and here at FCCI, and it's exciting times. We're just thrilled with what God is doing and what's being accomplished through FCCI. So, if you're someone who would really love to increase your impact and your influence within community, we would love to talk to you. We are looking for more group leaders, those who can facilitate our group conversations that happen on a weekly basis. So local groups that happen, as well as those that happen online in our virtual environment. So please feel free to reach out. You can talk about the topic. We are looking forward to being able to spend the time with Gary Williams and look at what does it mean to witness in the marketplace and be effective in this calling that God's given us to create platforms for ministry and to deliver the gospel message through our business. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you in February.